They say when someone swings an axe at you in a boardroom, the smart thing is to duck. I didn't. I stood tall and took the blow, because I knew something Vivian Rowe didn't. Axes are short-term tools. I build legacies. My name is Nathan Brandt. I'm 49 years old, and until that Tuesday morning, I was Senior Vice President of Operations at Kestrel Systems, a tech logistics company that, until recently, was known more for precision than flash. For the last 19 years, I built my department from a 9-person unit into a 100-person engine that outpaced every other division in efficiency, retention, and profit margin. We didn't get celebrated. We got things done. And yet there I was, seated across from our new CEO, Vivian Rowe, in her aggressively minimalist office. No photos, no degrees on the wall, just a glass desk, a stone vase with one white lily, and a stack of folders I wasn't invited to look at. She didn't offer me coffee, didn't waste time. "Nathan," she said, her tone the kind you use when pretending empathy, "we're in a transition period, and transitions require adaptability." I said nothing. I'd learned early in my career that silence unnerves the people who depend on jargon. She continued, crossing one leg over the other like she was posing for a rebrand campaign. "You've done meaningful work here. No one questions your contributions, but we're shifting toward a leaner, more dynamic leadership model. We need voices that reflect where we're going, not just where we've been." Then came the envelope. Cream-colored, my name typed with eerie precision on the label. "This isn't personal," she added, sliding it across the desk like a poker chip. "It's strategic. We're looking for leaders who can adapt, who aren't tied to how things used to be." I didn't flinch, didn't blink. Just took the envelope, tucked it into my briefcase, and stood. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said, because that's what people like her expect to hear. I extended my hand. She hesitated, just a second too long, before taking it. The handshake wasn't warm. It wasn't even firm. It was a placeholder. I left without asking to say goodbye to my team. That wasn't part of the script. Instead, I nodded at the assistant outside her door, stepped into the elevator, and pressed L for lobby. No music, no mirrors, just cold brush steel and the dull hum of descent. I didn't cry. I calculated. I calculated how many projects I had led that saved this company from bleeding contracts. I calculated the client retention rate that had earned us the long-term logistics contracts Vivian's pet departments couldn't even pitch for. I thought about the initiative I authored, still in use today, that reduced average delivery cycle time by 32%. Metrics she clearly hadn't bothered to read. The elevator doors opened to the reception floor, where 2 junior analysts glanced up from their screens, visibly startled to see me walking out with my coat over my arm and no visible rage on my face. I nodded to them too. One of them looked like she might cry. I walked out into the parking garage and sat in my car for 12 full minutes. Engine off, no music, just silence. When I got home that evening, I poured myself a drink, not to numb the pain, but to mark the moment. Scotch, neat. Something decent I'd been saving for the next promotion. Funny. Then I powered up my personal laptop and opened a folder I hadn't touched in over a year. Kestrel Ops Archive. Not company property, just snapshots, data summaries, presentations, performance matrices, the kind of files you keep when you know someone someday will try to rewrite your contribution. The numbers didn't lie. The facts didn't bend. I reviewed them like a surgeon reviews x-rays, clinically, thoroughly, with detachment. Afterward, I pulled out a black leather-bound journal from the drawer beside my desk, a gift from a former intern turned team lead, engraved with the word anchor. I hadn't written in it before. I opened to the first page, uncapped my pen, and wrote one sentence. She confused legacy with limitation. That was her first mistake. Then I closed the journal, finished my scotch, and stared out the window at the skyline. My phone buzzed twice, a message from someone on my old team. "They just told us. This isn't right. We're all shocked." I didn't reply. I'd already started planning. The thing about silence is, it gives people time to realize who really held the thread. A month had passed since Vivian handed me my walking papers, with corporate detachment dressed as vision. The severance check cleared without issue. I didn't touch most of it. My expenses were modest, my house paid off, and the panic they expected me to feel never arrived. I'd been through worse storms. I just didn't broadcast it. Instead of bitterness, I stayed busy, quietly, strategically. 3 days after I left Kestrel, my inbox started pinging. Former clients, ex-colleagues, vendors. Not with sympathy, but curiosity. People asking if I was available for a chat. You learn quickly who saw you as a title, and who recognized the architecture behind the machine. I didn't advertise anything. I just said I had time to meet. And I listened. One of those meetings changed the game. It was with Leo Cartwright, my old mentor, and the former COO of a rival logistics firm. He retired early, said he was done with the politics, but we always kept in touch. When we met for drinks at a private lounge downtown, I could tell he was circling something important. We toasted over Lagavulin, no ice. He leaned in like he did when he used to prep me before big presentations and said, "Vivian's in over her head. They promoted buzzwords instead of backbone." I didn't confirm or deny, just let him talk. Kestrel's bleeding, quietly, client retention's down, morale's nosediving. 3 senior managers jumped ship in the last 2 weeks. One of them left a 2-line resignation email. I'm not burying my reputation to validate hers. I sipped my drink and waited. He set his glass down. The board wants an independent view, no reports, no paper trail. Just someone with eyes on the inside, someone who knows what smooth looks like. They asked me who could do it discreetly. I gave them your name. It wasn't flattery. It was a lifeline wrapped in opportunity. I nodded once. Tell them I'll need access to the non-client-facing systems, not emails, just operational dashboards, workforce retention analytics, and contract velocity rates. Leo smirked. Already assumed you would. You'll get a read-only dashboard, VPN secured, no fingerprints. By the time I got home, the access credentials were in my inbox. I sat down, opened my laptop, and the moment I logged into Kestrel's ops interface, I could smell the rot. It wasn't sabotage, it was neglect. Decisions made by people chasing applause instead of alignment. Fulfillment accuracy had dropped 12% in 4 weeks. Client escalations were up. The centralized team Vivian installed had implemented a one-size-fits-all model that alienated 3 of our largest partners. On paper, it looked modern. In reality, it was unraveling decades of nuanced process refinement. I documented everything, quietly. Every flaw was logged, every deviation mapped. I didn't leak, I didn't grandstand, I just gathered truth like kindling. Week 2, I got a ping from a senior project manager I once mentored. Her message was short. I miss clarity. We're flying blind now. Week 3, I started getting backdoor invites to networking mixers, events Vivian's new innovation team wasn't attending. Apparently, most of them were too busy rewriting mission statements and planning DE and iPhoto ops for the website. Meanwhile, ops were crumbling under the weight of aesthetic ambition. At one mixer, a former Kestrel analyst pulled me aside and whispered, "She's pushing out everyone who built the place, like muscle memory is a liability." I just smiled. Because I had no need to argue, the data was already doing that for me. By the end of the month, I sent Leo a single document, no cover letter, no fluff. Just a 70-slide audit deck with annotated trends, blind spots, and projected losses if current practices continued. I included a time-stamped log of every red flag, some of which had begun to spread into legal territory. Not violations, not yet, but cracks. Ones you notice when you've spent half your life tightening the walls. Leo called me the next day. Board's rattled, not just impressed, rattled. They want to talk. I paused. I'm not coming back. They're not offering that. They want advisement, temporary, no title, just influence. I considered it, not for revenge, not for pride, for precision. I didn't want the spotlight. I wanted the blueprint in my hands again, the one I built. Set it up, I said. I'll listen. Before we hung up, Leo chuckled. She wanted someone untied to the past. She got it. And it's unraveling her present. That night, I poured another scotch and opened my journal. Under the line I'd written the night I was fired, I added a second one. Legacy doesn't resist change, it resists incompetence. And I kept going. There's a kind of silence that hums like a power line just before it sparks. That's what the air felt like the morning I found the chat thread. I wasn't looking for it. I was knee-deep in latency logs, comparing pre- and post-Vivian workflows for a deck I was building for the board. Most of what I found was typical of a rushed reorg. Delays, duplicated approvals, failed escalations. Nothing criminal, just sloppy. But then I clicked through an access point tied to an internal planning dashboard and saw something I shouldn't have seen. A sandboxed Slack archive mislabeled as Legacy Migration, Archive A. It wasn't Legacy Migration, it was the C-suite group chat. I shouldn't have had access to it, but the permissions were lazy, too broad. Someone had copied folders instead of securing them. That someone, it turns out, had the same casual disregard for protocol that had gotten me fired. Irony tastes sharper when it's handed to you, wrapped in a zip file. I opened the first transcript. Vivian, time-stamped 2 weeks before I was terminated. Ops dinosaurs still think performance metrics mean anything in the new model. Just wait till we launch the culture audit. A few lines later, from a senior strategist, you think the board will sign off? Vivian, they're fossils. They want results, not process. We'll manipulate the Q2 client feedback to justify alignment shifts. By then, we'll have replaced most of the legacy heads anyway. I sat still for a long time after that. Another line, this one more venomous, hit harder. Can't wait to clean house. Brandt's department is a shrine to inefficiency. He still signs emails with respectfully. LOL. No crimes, no smoking gun, just ego, contempt, evidence of intent to manipulate feedback loops, and an open admission that my firing wasn't about adaptability. It was strategy, a purge disguised as progress. I didn't rage. I documented. I copied the full transcript, encrypted it on a local drive, and locked it behind a password only I would understand. I didn't share it, didn't forward it. That would have made me the story. And this story wasn't about me. It was about erosion, of trust, of ethics, of competence, and I was done playing the humble casualty. That night, I stayed up drafting a report for the board, not an expose, an assessment. I flagged 5 structural vulnerabilities in the company's ethical command chain, all hypothetically linked to internal strategic messaging that contradicted public and contractual obligations. I cited examples, sanitized, redacted, but clear enough to ignite curiosity. I labeled one appendix, conversations suggesting possible manipulation of client data for internal agenda setting. I didn't sign it. I sent it through Leo, who forwarded it straight to the audit subcommittee. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from him. They read it 3 times, expect fallout. I didn't have to wait long. By Friday, a mid-tier tech blog ran a headline that made me exhale for the first time in days. Disruption or deception, inside the culture shift, crippling a top firm. The article didn't cite names, but it referenced internal communications, a possible whistleblower, and a growing rift between the board's expectations and Vivian's progressive strategies. One quote in particular mirrored her Slack message almost word for word. Legacy isn't dead. It's just inconvenient to people who don't understand it. By Monday, the article had hit 2 mainstream business outlets. LinkedIn posts from Kestrel employees started popping up with vague references to toxic shifts and unmoored leadership. Vivian's account, radio silent, her daily thought leader content vanished. She didn't even like other people's posts. Inside Kestrel, it was chaos. I wasn't there, but the messages rolled in, quiet, cautious notes from former colleagues. We saw the article. Thank you. You didn't deserve what they did. We're finally being heard. I didn't reply to most, just archived them. One stood out, though, from an analyst who had once shadowed me during a 6-month leadership rotation. Her note was 2 sentences. I almost quit last week. The article changed that. Now I know we weren't the problem. I stared at her message for a long time. Later that night, I poured a drink. No celebration, just ritual. I pulled out my journal, opened to a new page beneath the last line I'd written, and added, "She mocked the foundation. Now it's cracking beneath her." I closed the book. I wasn't finished, not yet. Because when a house starts to fall, the first noise isn't always the loudest. It's the quiet splintering of beams no one bothered to reinforce. They called it an emergency alignment session. That's what the board titled the calendar invite. But everyone knew what it really was. It was the reckoning. Leo had given me the heads up the night before. They're bringing everyone in. No PR, no assistance. Just board, C-suite, and you. I didn't ask for an agenda. I didn't need one. When an organization bleeds and the usual transfusions stop working, they don't call the marketer, they call the architect. I arrived early, wore navy, not black. No need to dress like a ghost from their past, just solid, tailored, unbothered. I brought no laptop, no paper, only a small leather folio and a pen I didn't plan to use. The meeting room was top floor, arched windows, boardroom table that could seat 20. 17 people sat when I walked in. 18 after I did. Vivian sat at the far end, arms folded, face unreadable. Chairman Dwyer opened. "Nathan, we appreciate you coming. We've reviewed your findings. This isn't a performance review, it's a stabilization discussion. We need insight, strategy, a path forward." I nodded once. Of course. And then I laid it out. Without bravado, without bitterness. I spoke clearly, outlining 3 key recommendations. Decentralized responsibility for client escalation paths, restoration of legacy client engagement sequences, and a temporary freeze on structural changes until a true, data-led culture survey could be conducted, internally, not by Vivian's external PR firm. Every proposal came with rationale, metrics, benchmarks pre- and post-implementation of Vivian's changes. Every chart I recited from memory. I had built the systems. I didn't need printouts to speak truth. When I finished, silence hovered just long enough to make someone uncomfortable. That someone was Vivian. She leaned forward, finally breaking her stillness. "This sounds a lot like regression, Nathan, a resistance to innovation. We've been clear that adaptability is the goal." I didn't flinch. "Adaptability without accountability is chaos. This isn't resistance, it's repair." She exhaled with just enough theatrical flair to remind everyone she came from the branding world. "You've been gone a month. Your name is on none of these systems anymore. You've inserted yourself in company affairs post-termination and provided unauthorized internal content to the board." I turned to her, calm and unblinking. "I was asked to consult, legally. The board authorized my access, and the content I provided wasn't internal. It was observable outcomes tied to public-facing metrics, all within bounds." She opened her mouth again, but Dwyer raised a hand. "Vivian, let's not confuse whistleblowing with sabotage." Another board member, Nadia, the youngest on the panel, sharp and unflinching, spoke next. "You're not being outmaneuvered by nostalgia, you're being outperformed by standards." That sentence hung in the air like smoke. Vivian's jaw tightened. She didn't speak again. There was no yelling, no finger pointing, just silence as the board went around the table, sharing observations, concerns, projections. When they voted, not to fire her, not yet, but to approve my recommendations and install me as interim operational strategist, it was done without ceremony. Just hands raised, nods exchanged, and Dwyer writing it down. "Effective immediately," he said. I stood, gathered my folio. "You'll have the first implementation brief by Friday." As I made my way to the exit, I felt her before I heard her. Vivian, heels clicking fast to catch up. "Nathan," she said, forcing my name through clenched teeth. I turned just as I reached the glass door. She dropped her voice. "You've made your point, but this isn't a win. You think the board trusts you? You're a stopgap, a nostalgia tour." I tilted my head. "That's the problem. You still think this is about trust?" She scoffed. "Enlighten me." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move closer. I simply said, "You wanted someone who wasn't tied to the past. The problem is, your future was built by it." Then I opened the door and walked out. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just certain. Because stability isn't loud. It doesn't wear designer heels or post TED Talk snippets. It doesn't trend. It endures. And in that moment, every part of me knew. She was just now beginning to understand what she had dismissed. And I had only just started. There's a quiet that settles in after you've proven your point without raising your voice. That's the kind of silence that surrounds me now, in my new office. No logos on the wall, no receptionist at the front, no ego at the door. Just clean lines, a wide window facing east, and a desk with more wisdom etched into its wood grain than most strategy decks hold in slides. 6 months. That's how long it's been since I stepped into that boardroom and watched the tide turn. Not with a roar, but with a shift, a correction. The kind of pivot that doesn't make headlines, but changes everything. I'm not running Kestrel. I never wanted to. The board made the offer, formally, twice. Sent over glossy proposals, performance bonuses, golden handcuffs disguised as incentives. I declined without hesitation, because I'd already done the legacy building. I wasn't interested in maintaining a monument someone else would try to repaint every 5 years. I wanted motion, ownership, precision. So I built something of my own. No name on the door, no website, no brochure. Just a list of 3 clients, very large ones, all former Kestrel partners who called within a week of the article breaking last spring. Each conversation began the same way. We don't need a consultant, we need a standard. That word again. Not innovation, not vision, not disruption. Standard. I don't pitch anymore. I listen. I show up. I map dysfunction to intent, and I leave behind systems built not to trend, but to last. Quiet things. Durable things. The irony? Vivian was right about one thing. The company needed change, but she mistook change for erasure. She came in swinging a wrecking ball, not realizing some of the walls she was tearing down were the ones holding up the roof. She stepped down 3 months ago. The press release was sterile. Personal reasons, exciting new chapters, proud of the transformation she helped lead. The board didn't mention the consultant report. They didn't reference the client exodus or the internal memos that leaked quietly to shareholder circles. But in our industry, silence speaks louder than press kits. Everyone knew. I got a message from one of the senior board members last week. One line. She mistook Flash for foundation. You didn't. I didn't reply. Some stories don't need sequels. Now, my days start early and end sharp. I work fewer hours, but with more clarity. I take meetings that matter. I build teams for others, not ones that dazzle, but ones that don't collapse under scrutiny. I don't have a title, but I have leverage. And in this world, that's more valuable than power. The phone buzzes occasionally with invitations, keynotes, interviews, op-eds. I decline most of them. I don't need my face on a stage. I already made my point in silence. I still have the journal, the one I opened the night Vivian fired me. It sits in the top drawer of my desk, next to the pen I used that first night. Black leather, worn now at the edges. Today I took it out. I flipped through the pages. The first entry. She confused legacy with limitation. That was her first mistake. Below it, the second, legacy doesn't resist change. It resists incompetence. Then, she mocked the foundation. Now it's cracking beneath her. And you wanted someone who wasn't tied to the past. The problem is, your future was built by it. Each line written at a moment when silence was louder than confrontation, when observation beat accusation. Now, at the very bottom of the page, I write, she wanted change, she got collapse, and all I had to do was hold the standard. I signed the page and closed the book.